On episode 30 of Chit Chat, we look back at 2018 and everything Kickstarter had to offer. This year had some big campaigns and some very big campaigns. We recap some of the highlights and how they had to fight for backers' attention and dollars. Welcome back to Chit Chat. It is episode 30, and today we are going to be talking about Kickstarter. Now, we've talked about Kickstarter before, but today we're going to be taking a look at sort of Kickstarter 2018, some of the hits, some of the ones we've liked, just kind of trends that we're seeing in Kickstarter, because it's obviously on everyone's mind, or a lot of board gamers' mind anyway. We do a lot of Kickstarting, some more than others. But yeah, we're going to talk about Kickstarter. Before we get to that, we're going to talk about who won our contest last time and the contest we've got this time.
All right, so Michelle Compton, you won Realm of Sand and Siege Storm. Email us at manversusmeeple@gmail.com. And we're giving away Herbaceous and Sunset Over Water, both by Pencil First Games.
Yep, right
Just
here behind us.
Make a comment below, and you'll be entered to win.
So let's dive right in. Who wants to start the conversation?
Well, we can talk about a lot of different things. Let's talk about what games we've enjoyed this year. Let's start there.
From Kickstarter?
From Kickstarter. That have
so
launched,
delivered, or?
Let's talk about games that have launched this year. Let's start there.
Okay.
Well, there's been a ton of great games that have launched.
Yeah.
I've got probably the two that I'm looking forward to most that I backed this year, Court of the Dead Mourner's Call, which I'm really excited about, and Gugong, which was should be coming any day now.
Right.
I'm very excited to get that game.
Yeah, Gugong, I didn't, like I said at the top of the show, I don't back that much, but I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a little FOMO when it comes to some of these things. Gugong, which we did, preview for us, what was it called, Forbidden City at the time?
It was, yeah.
Awesome game. The quintessential medium weight Euro, in my opinion, of the year, at least on Kickstarter.
Well, they ran a great Kickstarter campaign, and they did, personally for me, what I think Kickstarter should be used for. Not just to print the game, but to take all that extra money you're getting and put it back into the product. And they had great components, upgraded game trays.
Really good stretch
everything
goals,
about the game looks gorgeous and really well produced.
Yeah.
Same thing with Endeavor. That's a game that has just recently delivered to backers, and I like that trend. I like the trend of seeing games that maybe people have missed, over the years, or people just now getting into the hobby. Yeah, people just now getting into the hobby don't know what Endeavor is, and it's a classic Z-Man Euro game. And not only did they reprint it, but they redid it in a really nice fashion. They gave upgraded components, they added new gameplay mechanisms to it, so and they put it in the game trays, and that just enhances it. And we're starting to hear some rumors about some other games that we've loved in the past that are going to be re-implemented next year that we can't really talk about right now. But I like that trend. I like seeing those older games get a remake. Eclipse is one of those as well.
Yeah,
Eclipse was an older game that got remade this year as well, and a lot of people hadn't played that one.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Z-Man too, because Z-Man is notorious for putting games out there and never reprinting them.
Yeah, they're hard to find.
Right. So we're starting to see that. Alongside the one you just mentioned, there was also Atlantis Rising, which is an old Z-Man game, right? Which just came out from Elf Creek Games on Kickstarter. They had a success. I think it's just finishing up, actually, or getting close to it. I think they're staying around the 120,000 mark, which is really good. I think they're really happy with that. And again, they improved things, changed the mechanics, and brought a game that actually is not terribly old. It came out, 2010 or 11 or something?
Something like that, yeah.
And brought it out to a new audience, just like Endeavor.
Yeah, I like the idea, too, of not only re-implementing those older games, but let's be honest, Kickstarter's become a way to sell miniatures. Some of the games aren't typically fantastic, but they're a way to push plastic, and people are buying into it. But also on the flip side, there's a lot of really good creative games. Two of them that I'll talk about. One is Chronicles of Crime, which is a fantastic game from Lucky Duck that uses virtual reality kind of in a really unique way, because you're using your iPad or your phone to look at murder scenes or investigative scenes in 3D, and you're passing cards around and you're talking about it. It's a very neat way of approaching it. The other one is Journal 29, which just recently hit backers. And it's nothing more than just a book with puzzles in every single page, but it's really unique, and it's a way to deliver something that most people aren't accustomed to. It's not just a typical board game, but it's something different.
Yeah. No, and that's one of the great things about Kickstarter, and the internet in general, really, is you take a product like Journal 29, which back in the day, you'd kind of have to stumble across that on a random trip to the bookstore.
Yes.
And just happen to see it and go, whoa, what is this? And of course, there wasn't like all the push and advertising behind it, but now you got a book like that, which is really, like you said, at its heart, a puzzle book, but it kind of falls into this board game category, or at least alongside a lot of other board games, because it appeals to that sort of sort of person. And yeah, I don't know what it ended up doing, but I know I backed it, and I barely back anything.
And the graphic novel adventures too was really cool too, by Van Ryder, same kind of format.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opinions out there on Kickstarter and like what it's good for. And you're right when you say that it pushes minis. I mean, some of the biggest games of the year were minis games. But what people forget is those smaller projects. I mean, there's a lot of really ambitious projects that probably wouldn't have done well if they had gone straight to retail.
Sure.
Things that would have gotten overlooked, or games that wouldn't have the nice component upgrades that they have right now. And I think we can't forget that Kickstarter still exists for those reasons, right? Mm-hmm. But really the projects that are making tons of money are the mini games.
Yeah.
Batman Gotham City Chronicles or whatever came out this year. I made over $4 million.
Yeah, well,
as a huge minis game.
So why do you, let's talk about that for a second. Why do you think that is? Because a lot of people have always told me, well, a lot of people just buy these games just so they can get the minis and paint them and use those minis. Like, even if they're not like buying it for the game, which has never made sense to me. And particularly look at some of these games too that are not traditional minis games. Street Fighter's another one that did gigantic numbers this year. Like, it did like, I think
2 million.
2 to 3 million.
2 million, yeah.
And it has miniatures,
cool
or
miniatures.
figures, really, rather. And I think it's less, in my opinion, it seems to be less about like, oh, I want to get these miniatures so I can have more miniatures and paint miniatures, and more about just those types of things appealing to the child in all of us. It's like a toy, right? It makes things a little bit more, oh, cool. As I was looking and doing research for this, you look at a lot of those really successful things, and whether you're buying them to paint or not, when you scroll down a page of a game that has a lot of that stuff going on, it just looks like the best Christmas present you could open, with all these things, these lines and lines of little toys all over the place. And to me, psychologically, that seems like it must be part of it.
I think it is.
It's a huge part of it, I'm sure.
It's a huge part of it, but I also think that the consumer is becoming smarter. I really do. Like, if you look at, and I don't have hard data to back this up, but my gut tells me if I were to do some really heavy research into Kickstarter, that those miniature titles that released 2 to 3 years ago are doing much more than they are today. And I do have some numbers here. Like, when I look at games like Hate, for instance, CMON typically has been a huge miniature pusher. Yeah. However, Hate hit some backlash because of the way it was delivered. I do know the consumer seems to be smarter today because they're doing the research, they're reading the rule books, and they're communicating. They're communicating on the Kickstarter itself. They're communicating in Reddit. They're communicating on BGG.
They definitely communicate.
And they're talking about those games, whether or not they think they're good. So there's some projection forward where it seems in the past everyone would just back whatever. You know?
I mean, backers have to be more selective, because it used to be CMON would launch a Zombicide, or somebody would come out with like Mythic Battles Pantheon, and you have a cool miniatures game to back. Now, at any given day on Kickstarter, you can get 200 miniatures from like any project. So
yeah, you can't simply, and I don't even know if this was ever the case, you can't simply just put a box that has a ton of miniatures out there. I mean, I think the games have always had to have had some of that. I do agree with you. I think people are doing more research, and they're being a little bit more thorough about it. I also think, whether there's research being done or not, there are more vocal Kickstarter backers than ever. That just has continued to grow and grow. So even if a game is fantastic in any other respect, if there's a sort of wave of people who have an outcry against it for one reason or another, it can have a huge impact on it. That's
absolutely.
I mean, we talked with enough people who do Kickstarters, and we ourselves, dealing with a lot of that potential backlash and unhappy customers. We were just having a talk on a thread the other day. You can make one person happy with this decision and make 10 more unhappy with the same decision. So you're kind of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation in a lot of cases.
And we're seeing that start to show in the number of canceled projects too. We're seeing more canceled projects this year than probably in past years, because people look in that first 24 to 48 hours, and if their projections aren't right, they pull the trigger and they relaunch at a later time.
I mean, we're seeing a lot of them come back and then succeed on their second try.
Yeah, I find that interesting, because a lot of these will launch and just in the matter of a couple days
Yeah, sometimes a
cancel,
week later.
and then they'll relaunch a week later or just in a short time later. And to whatever degree they've and some of them don't even seem to me like they've made like drastic changes.
No.
They're just slightly different. And maybe it almost seems like it was a bit of a dry run. It got word out. Some people were aware of it. I mean, almost like the initial run was an advertisement for what they were ultimately going to end up doing.
I feel like we're going to see this more and more, and it just goes to speak that there's no way to figure out this magic Kickstarter formula.
Right.
Yeah.
When a game comes on Kickstarter and does nothing, and then a week later comes on another Tuesday and does $100,000 in the first 48 hours, I mean, why?
I think there will
what's the
always
difference?
be some mystery there. I do think, I mean, again, we don't know for sure, but there are some elements to Kickstarters that I think you can look at and say, well, don't know how successful you'll be, but you're not going to be successful unless you do X, Y, and Z.
I don't know. I mean, looking at some of the titles I pulled off here, Hate being one of those things, that's an Eric Lang game. And Eric Lang is a huge name in the industry.
No, I think that there's definitely a deeper thing with Kickstarter. People don't care as much about the designers, but you can sell a lot just if you look at the actual Kickstarter pages of some of these projects that do really well. Like if you look at like games that have succeeded, like Hate, which had a really cool video, a really cool Kickstarter page, and it was kind of a niche product. But like when you compare that to Escape Plan, which didn't have a lot of advertising, their Kickstarter page kind of looked like a Euro game. Like it didn't have a lot of exciting things going on. I mean, that seems silly.
Well, I don't know if Hate had a cool video.
Well,
it had a very
it had a
controversial video.
memorable
let's say that.
video.
But
Yeah.
I will
video.
agree with that. I think that the better that the publisher makes their Kickstarter page, the better it's going to appear to the audience. One company that does that is Roxley. Like they do such a good job in presenting the material they have with the look of that Kickstarter, the graphic design of that Kickstarter page. And Thundergriff Games is another one that came out of nowhere, and they have a lot of smaller projects, but they do really well on Kickstarter because Gon, who is the owner of that company, knows how to present the game. Like it presents itself so well, and that people just want to automatically back it, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, he did that from the very beginning too.
Yeah.
He came out, like you said, nowhere. It was Tao Long was one of the first ones I remember.
Yeah.
And it blew.
We were wondering why it was doing so well.
It blew up on Kickstarter,
the
and
page was
it
beautiful.
doesn't seem like a traditional
No.
Kickstarter success sort of game, and it absolutely blew up. And I think a lot of it has to do with knowing how to not just manage the Kickstarter, but how to make it look and how to present it. James Hudson is another person who's very good at that.
Tidal Blades had a great Kickstarter page.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Tidal Blades, which was right alongside Cloudspire at the same time, right? I think those launched maybe on the same day.
Right around the same time, for sure.
Those were two really, and those weren't, I mean, they didn't go over $1 million, but they both did what, like
700,000.
4 or 5, 600,000. Two really solid campaigns that just, when you look at those pages, you can't really go down there and feel like there was any one aspect that was weak.
Again, I'm gonna question that because look at Reichbusters, which everyone here would agree that's probably the single best board game trailer we've ever seen.
video is
the
insane.
video is amazing.
Even the Kickstarter page is really, really well done. It's only at $650K with 15 hours left. Like, what happened there? Like, why isn't that game doing $4 to $5 million with the look of that game and all the miniatures in that game?
See, to your point a second ago, whereas in some cases I think designers might not make a difference. So take Reichbusters, that exact same campaign, the exact same game, slap Eric Lang's name on it and it's a CMON thing, I guarantee you it's double what that is because of those variables.
Yeah.
Because it just has that cachet behind it. Because I'd never heard of Reichbusters until it was effectively launching.
Right.
But if Reichbusters had launched 2 years ago, it would have made over $1 million easy.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
I don't know. And I think that's has more to do with the glut of things on Kickstarter today compared to
Fatigue in general.
Fatigue and just the amount of stuff that's out there, right?
Well, and look at the games that did really, really well on Kickstarter this year, and you're going to notice a lot of things in common. Like Batman, Horizon Zero Dawn, Street Fighter. I mean, the games that are killing it on Kickstarter are based on intellectual properties.
True.
And then you have games like Nemesis from Awakened Realms, which, while not Alien the board game,
It's Alien the board
is
game.
Alien the board game, and you have
Although
this company that has a huge track record of delivering these big Kickstarters. I think it's just you have to have something to stand out.
Agreed.
anymore.
Although I would say, even though that does kind of look like Alien, I would hand most of the credit to them and their reputation, right? I mean, they just
They keep getting better and
whatever
better.
they do
Yeah.
next is probably going to also be a big Kickstarter.
Which we have over there.
Right, I know.
One of the other ones too that doesn't have miniatures is Dinosaur Island. Like that did $2 million.
That's true, yeah.
Who expected that? The Back to the Extinction, which was the relaunch of the original game, then Duelosaur, and then the expansion for Dinosaur Island, $2 million off just a typical board game,
That's
like
big.
with no minis. Like that's pretty impressive.
No minis, but obviously really over the top production, right?
Sure. Yes.
And I think they had sort of lightning in a bottle with that.
The theme?
The theme,
Yeah.
and
Like
it
the
kind of
90s
being
artwork
unique, and the sort
vibe
of
and
Jurassic
everything.
Park vibe to
Yeah.
it. And a very unique look to it, right, with all the colors and everything. So, again, those are hard things. You can't say, yeah. I can't imagine anyone say, yeah, we knew exactly that this was going to happen because of all those design
No,
choices
because you'll
we
see
made.
somebody launch a Kickstarter that breaks records, and the next Kickstarter just doesn't get any attention at all.
Right.
And it just goes to show nobody has really figured out how to.
Do you guys buy into the whole when you release it in the year, like holiday time is harder than?
And I don't
I'm-
because
I'm-
there's plenty of exceptions to all of those.
Yeah,
There's
there
huge
is.
exceptions to all of those. So back when we were, you'll remember this, in the video game industry, everyone held their games and put them out in the holiday.
Yeah.
Nobody released games in the first quarter of the year.
Now it's huge.
Nobody.
Yeah.
And then I think it was one of the first Resident Evil games of the later
remember.
generations
Yeah.
slipped. And Capcom decided, you know what, we'll release it in March. I remember it very specifically, and it did incredible numbers because A, it's a big property that everyone wanted, but B, there was nothing else going on.
Well, I think
and
that's-
now, of course, look at the first half of the year.
God of
That's
War
when-
came
That's
out.
when some of the
Huge.
best games come out now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just, when common knowledge is, well, don't launch in November. Well, somebody's going to launch in November, and they're going to be the only project that launched in November. So anyone that
They
wants,
won't be the only project.
Well, but you know what I
Maybe the
mean,
best
like-
Not
project.
anymore. But
not anymore, but there was.
When we launched our first Kickstarter back in 2016, we ran that in November, or mostly December, kind
Yeah.
of straddled November, December. And we were really pleased with the success of that and the support that we got. And I think a lot of people have always said in Kickstarter,
Stay away from it.
Stay
Yeah.
away from December, because, and you can come up with reasons to consider
Yeah.
that, right? Like, well, the holidays are coming up. Everyone's like, and for every argument like that, you can say, well, a lot of people are getting money for the holidays. It all depends on how you present it. I mean, I could actually see potentially someone saying, promoting a Kickstarter they're going to launch on Christmas Day and say, we've got a big present for you under the tree on Christmas morning. Come back to Kickstarter and check it out. And build up a
Going
lot
good.
of anticipation. Simon could pull that off easy.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
think
just
they
somebody's going to do it, right? And that's the thing about Kickstarter is like, anything that you think is true about Kickstarter, somebody's going to come along and prove that that's not true.
Right, exactly.
Which is why nobody's out there with 100%, success rate on everything they do. Like, it's just
The last thing I
Stuff
want
to
to talk
predict.
about is what do you guys think about the current trend of publishers using Kickstarter as a pre-sale? And I don't mean as a lot of publishers do that, but as a pure pre-sale. And one
Where they
game
don't
that,
need the money.
Well, no, not even that. Like Claustrophobia 1643 just got done kickstarting in November. They're delivering in January. The product was already manufactured. It was already on the boats getting ready to ship. They used it strictly as a pre-sale. Like, what do you guys feel about?
So
I'll let
yeah,
you start.
I'm of two minds on this, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier. So a game that is coming back like Endeavor, where they're like they don't know how many copies to make, and if they end up selling 1 million copies, then they can really put money back into the game. And if they're putting that extra money back into the game, I have no problem with it. Like Tricerion came back to Kickstarter this year with like a deluxe presentation. Everything was super nice. They couldn't go straight to retail with
Trying to
that.
engage in enthusiasm.
Right,
for the
because
game, yeah.
you don't want to print off this $100 game
Right.
in mass, but somebody that comes in, they have one pledge option and it's $40. It's the same price as retail, and they're not giving any stretch goals. They're not putting that extra money back into the game. I wonder what was even the point.
Well, it's the pre-sale.
Right. So those, I'm just like, do it on your website, right? I mean,
Well-
I don't know that.
So, my answer to that question is, what's their URL?
Well, right. Who knows? But everybody knows Kickstarter.
Everyone knows Kickstarter. It's the same reason someone sells at Walmart as opposed to Joe's Crab Shack. Whatever. It's a huge platform through which to sell a product. And I know it wasn't the initial sort of pitch
Well, that's
for
still
Kickstarter.
not the initial, like,
The initial pitch for Kickstarter was like, we are here to let average Joe bring something to market
Yeah.
with
Right.
their creativity. And the big companies saw it as a platform, and me personally have zero problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I've always felt like if you don't like it, then you don't have to back it. Just, you know, ignore it and look for the Kickstarters you want to back. And I know that's a potentially very unpopular opinion with a lot of Kickstarter backers out there, but I think as long as the system is built to support that, why not make it that way? It's also, you have to remember too, putting a lot more money into the pockets of the publisher making the game and taking it out of some of the chain of distribution and retailers. And I know that's not necessarily a great thing for the retail side of things, but some of these games may not be as possible, even if they don't put a ton of money back into them. Some of these games may not be as possible when you have to give up 50% of your margin to that traditional distribution mechanism.
True.
That's a good point.
I mean, I'll take that even further. I think that with so much competition out there, publishers are doing everything that they possibly can to get their product in front of consumers' eyes, and Kickstarter is that platform, and it's going to remain that platform unless Kickstarter, you know, puts their foot down and does something different. All I can say to the publishers, whichever one I'm looking at here, is make the best game possible, right?
Sure.
Make the best possible game that you can. Play test it to the hilt. Don't deliver something that's crappy, because the moment that you deliver that product and it starts getting in the backers' hands and they don't like it, you're doomed for your next project.
And unfortunately, even for the littlest thing, and that is a landmine field that you have to navigate. But like, it could be a great game otherwise, and everyone could pick on that one little thing that everyone has an issue with.
More than likely, though, if you put your best foot forward and you deliver something that's really good, Skulk Hollow being an example, it didn't do it extravagantly well on Kickstarter, but I think once backers start getting this game and playing it, it's going to blow up. It's going to have legs after the Kickstarter. And that's good for them because they made a solid game.
I think that's a great point. Companies are using it almost as a promotional tool. You know, you seed the market with some of the game, and then hopefully that word of mouth from the Kickstarter helps you once you.
It worked for like Seventh Continent, and they went back to Kickstarter with an even bigger Kickstarter after word got out. That
you can either use it to help promote what you want to do at retail, or if it does so well, you can just say.
I think even Dinosaur Island was like that too. The first Dinosaur Island campaign did well, but the second one did amazing because word had started to spread by that point.
Yep.
One last thing I wanted to touch on really quickly. I want to ask you guys, because you guys Kickstart a lot more than I do. Jamie Stegmaier recently made a post about the whole backing for $1. Did you guys read this article?
Yeah, that's a whole controversy right now. I know Gray Fox had a little bit to say about that as well.
Yeah, they were talking about the trend of like being able to back for $1 so that you can get back into it and grab some things.
Yeah, if you back for $1, you're in the system. So when the pledge manager opens, you can choose to either just give them your $1, or you could upgrade to the full copy, or just buy add-ons straight away without even
so you can get in
back in the project.
And sort of almost like reserve a space. I think at least what I've heard mostly is that people like it and publishers are doing it. So like this guy who may not have the money right now can get his name in the door so that when the pledge manager opens, he's still in there, and through add-ons or whatever mechanisms they have, he's still able to pledge once he has the money.
I'm sorry. What's the issue?
It's gonna sound pretty dumb if you're not like following this, but so people that back the project while it's going live, the total that they back at, the amount of money they give to the Kickstarter is added to the Kickstarter total, which will push that Kickstarter total up and unlock future stretch goals and things like that. People that back at $1, and for example, Reavers of Midgard had like 900 backers at $1.
Yeah, that's why this came up, I think.
So it didn't progress the stretch
goals. So it doesn't push the stretch goals forward.
So the other backers who want that to happen are upset that everyone else is able to come in at a low end and not push those stretch goals.
Right, so if every $1 backer, if 900 of those backers upgrade to the final version of the Pledge Manager, Gray Fox is going to be super happy, but no more stretch goals are going to be unlocked. So people that back while the project's live feel like their money might be more valuable.
But I think the publisher can retroactively give him the stretch goals. I'm looking at the estates right there. It didn't even meet the stretch goals, but he had enough finances to be able to do it at that point to deliver the stretch goals that were promised
I don't want to pull back the curtain too much, but everyone has to know to some degree, even if you've just backed a campaign from time to time, we didn't hit that stretch goal, and then all of a sudden it ships with it anyway. there's not a lot of companies, I'm here to tell you, there's not a lot of companies out there that have a list of 20 more stretch goals that they just go, oh, well. I mean, they usually plan to make some of these things happen, and they try to stretch those out, no pun intended, to try to incentivize people to keep backing in word of mouth to get more money out of the project.
There are some stretch goals that have been missed in certain games as far as like increasing the card stock or the quality of the insert and things like that.
I would just say consumers have the right to do whatever they want to do with their money.
Yeah.
If they want to pledge it $1 and then back it later, that's their prerogative.
We could do a whole other series of episodes on people who complain about Kickstarter.
Right, and it's just like this is the controversy of the week right now, right?
Sure.
Right.
Well, that's, I think, all we have to say about Kickstarter. I'm sure a lot of you have tons to say about Kickstarter, so don't go to Kickstarter and say them. Go down in the comments and share here. You'll actually get a chance to unlock some stretch goals and get Herbaceous or Sunset Over Water if you happen to be picked to win. So until next time, this has been episode 30 of Chit Chat, and we'll catch you guys then. Well, that's another episode of Chit Chat in the bag. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out another one, there's probably one right over here in the bottom left-hand corner, or probably your right-hand corner. Whatever corner, we have something to click on. So click on one of these things, and good things will happen.